In the quiet village of Nioni, life moved slowly. People worked in the fields, children played near the river, and everyone knew each other's name. In this peaceful place lived a young woman named Zubaida. Zubaida was not like the others. While most villagers were happy with farming and tradition, she dreamed of the city lights, tall buildings, busy roads, and a life full of new things. She wanted to wear fine clothes, live in a big house, and earn money, not from the soil, but from real work in the city. Her parents, though poor, loved her dearly. They supported her dreams even though they feared for her. "The city is not kind, my daughter," her father said. "But if your heart is set, go and make us proud." Beside her stood Kofi, her childhood love. Kofi was strong and gentle, always smiling as he walked in the fields. He had loved Zubaida since they were children. The thought of her leaving broke his heart. One morning, the village gathered at the dirt road where a rusty old bus waited. Zubaida stood there with her small bag, dressed in her finest clothes. She hugged her parents tightly, tears in her eyes. Then she turned to Kofi. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He only looked at her with sad eyes, filled with words he couldn't say. Finally, he whispered, "Promise me you'll come back. Promise me this isn't goodbye forever." Zubaida's voice trembled. "I promise, Kofi. I will come back for you. This is for us. I want a better life, for you, for me, for our future." The bus rumbled as it started. Zubaida climbed on, waving as the village faded behind her. Her heart beat fast, full of hope, fear, and excitement. As the bus drove away, Kofi stood alone on the road, watching until he could no longer see her. The air felt heavy. He picked up a stone from the road and held it tight. "She'll return," he said to himself. "She has to." The city was nothing like Nioni. When Zubaida arrived, she was overwhelmed. Cars honked, people shouted, and buildings touched the sky. The air smelled different, no trees, no fresh rain, just smoke and food stalls. She rented a small room in a crowded street and found a job as a helper in a cloth shop. It wasn't much, but she felt proud. Every day she worked hard, learning fast, and saving every coin. At night, she sat by her small window, thinking of Kofi. She wrote him letters, telling him about the city, about her dreams, and about how much she missed him. Back in Nioni, Kofi waited. He read her letters again and again. Her words were like music to him. He replied with stories from the village, how the crops were growing, how the river was high, and how everyone missed her. But deep inside, Kofi worried. The city had many temptations. What if someone else caught Zubaida's eye? What if she forgot about him? His friends laughed it off. "Zubaida loves you," they said. "She's not like others." Kofi smiled, but his nights were restless. He couldn't shake the fear that she might never return. One day, in the city, a rich merchant named Deo came into the cloth shop. He wore fine clothes, gold rings, and spoke with power. His eyes fell on Zubaida, and he smiled. "You are different," he said. "What is your name?" "Zubaida," she replied, politely bowing her head. "You work hard," Deo said. "I like that." From that day, Deo visited often, always kind, always bringing small gifts. He offered her a better job, better pay. "Come work for me," he said. "You have great potential." Zubaida hesitated. She remembered Kofi. She remembered her promise. But the city was expensive, and her dreams were big. That night, she sat by her window again, holding Kofi's latest letter. His words were sweet, full of love and hope. Her heart ached. "I won't forget you, Kofi," she whispered. "I promise." But in her heart, she felt the winds of change blowing. She didn't know it yet, But this journey would test not only her dreams, but her love, her values, and her very soul. Zubaida began her new job at Deo's shop, a place much larger and busier than the small cloth store she worked in before. Here, rich customers came daily, and Zubaida learned quickly how to serve them with grace. Her days were long, but the money was better, and for the first time, she could save properly. She still sent money back to Niani, helping her parents buy better tools for the farm. She also sent small gifts, scarves, shoes, and treats, to show she hadn't forgotten them. And with every parcel, she sent a letter to Kofi. Her letters remained warm. She wrote about how hard she worked, how busy the city was, and how she still held him in her heart. She promised that one day, they would build a better life together, one free from struggle and poverty. Back in Niani, Kofi read her letters with joy. He showed them to his friends, even read them aloud to his mother, who smiled and said, "Your Zubaida is doing well. She will come back for you, Kofi." Kofi believed it. Every time he walked in the fields or watched the sunset over the hills, he imagined Zubaida returning home, her arms open, her smile shining. But sometimes, when the wind blew at night, doubts crept in. Was the city changing her? Was someone else winning her heart? Still, Kofi kept writing letters, his words full of love and patience, hoping they would bring her back to him. In the city, life moved fast. Every day, Zubaida saw women wearing fine clothes, riding in big cars, laughing with men who looked powerful and rich. She watched them and wondered, could this be me one day? Deo noticed her curiosity. One evening, after closing the shop, he handed her a shiny box. "What is this?" Zubaida asked. "Open it," Deo said with a smile. Inside was a beautiful dress, soft fabric, bright colors, finer than anything she had ever touched. "I can't accept this," she said. "You deserve it," Deo replied. "You work hard. This is a gift, nothing more." Zubaida felt confused. No one had ever given her something so expensive. She thought of Kofi, would he approve? Was it wrong? Still, she took the gift and thanked Deo. From that day on, Deo showed her more attention. He invited her to fancy dinners, showed her the bright side of the city, places she had only seen in pictures. At first, Zubaida kept her distance. She remembered her promises to Kofi. But each time she wore the dress, each time she tasted rich food, each time Deo smiled at her like she was someone special, her heart grew weaker. She still wrote to Kofi, but her letters grew shorter. The words, "I miss you," appeared less. The words, "I'm busy," appeared more. Kofi noticed the change. He waited weeks for a reply to his last letter. When it finally came, Zubaida's words felt distant. He read the lines again. "I am working hard, Kofi. The city is tiring. I hope you're well. I'll write again soon." Kofi's hands trembled. "No, I love you. No, I miss you. No plans about returning." His friend Obi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe she's just tired." "Maybe," Kofi said, but inside, he feared the city had stolen her heart. One day, Deo invited Zubaida to a high-class event, a gathering of the city's elite. "You'll be the most beautiful woman there," he said. "I'm not sure I belong," she replied. "You belong anywhere you wish," he said. "You're no longer a village girl. You are more." Those words echoed in her mind, "You are more." That night, as she dressed in the gown Deo gave her, Zubaida looked into the mirror. She hardly recognized herself. She was beautiful, yes, but also confused. She thought of Kofi, walking under the sun, waiting for her letters. She thought of Niani, of the river, the trees, the people calling her name. And then she thought of Deo, and the life of luxury and ease he offered. As the car took her through the bright city lights, Zubaida realized she stood between two worlds, one of love and simplicity, the other of riches and power. She asked herself, can I go back? Or have I already gone too far? Little did she know, her next choice would change everything. Months had passed since Zubaida had left her village, Nioni. Her life in the city had become brighter, busier, and more complicated. The nights were loud, filled with music and laughter, and the days were long, full of work, fashion, and wealth. She was no longer the simple girl who had boarded a dusty bus with dreams in her eyes. Now, people in the city admired her beauty, her style, and her connection with Deo, the rich merchant. But deep inside, Zubaida's heart felt divided. One morning, Zubaida received a letter from her father. His words were urgent. Your mother is unwell, he wrote. We need you at home even if just for a few days. Zubaida's heart sank. She had missed her family, missed the calm of the village. Without delay, she packed her bags and boarded a bus back to Nioni. As the bus rode through the green hills and red soil roads, memories flooded her mind. She thought of Kofi, the promises they made, the love they once shared. Was he still waiting? When Zubaida stepped off the bus, the entire village stared in silence. She wore fine clothes, her hair done in the latest city style, gold earrings glimmering in the sun. Children whispered, elders shook their heads, and some smiled politely. Her father welcomed her with tears and joy, but many could not hide their surprise. She's not one of us anymore, someone muttered. Zubaida tried to smile, but the weight of their eyes made her feel like a stranger in her own land. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Zubaida walked to the old river, the place she and Kofi used to meet. She didn't expect to see him, but fate had other plans. Kofi stood there, throwing small stones into the water, deep in thought. When he turned and saw her, time seemed to stop. Zubaida, he said, barely above a whisper. She nodded. It's me, Kofi. They stood in silence, eyes locked, hearts racing. You didn't write for a long time, Kofi said. I was busy, she replied, her voice shaking. Life in the city, it's different. Kofi looked away. Did you forget your promise? Zubaida stepped closer. No. I could never forget. I still think of you. Their words were soft, but their emotions were loud. Years of love, distance, and longing burst into the open. That night, the village was quiet. The stars shone bright, and the air was filled with the smell of earth after rain. Zubaida and Kofi sat together under a tree near the river, talking about old times. He shared how lonely he had felt, how he waited, how he believed she'd return. Zubaida cried softly. I wanted to come back, but I got lost in the city life. I didn't mean to hurt you. You're here now, Kofi whispered. The night grew colder, but their hearts grew warmer. One thing led to another, and in a moment of passion and emotion, they gave in, sharing a night together under the stars, wrapped in old love and regret. As the sun rose, reality returned. Zubaida woke up next to Kofi, her heart full of confusion. What had she done? Her thoughts raced. Deo was waiting in the city. She had a life there, a life of comfort and riches. But in this small village, next to Kofi, she felt peace she hadn't felt in months. Kofi looked at her, his eyes hopeful. Stay, Zubaida. Stay with me. We can build a life here, together. Zubaida didn't answer. Her mind was a storm. Her heart was torn in two. Back in the village, whispers had begun. Someone had seen Zubaida and Kofi together that night. People talked. She's back for him. She's with that city man, isn't she? They broke the sacred bond. This will not end well. The village elder, Mama Kozaya, heard the whispers and felt a strange wind blow through Nioni. She looked to the sky, her face troubled. Something is wrong, she said. The spirits will not stay silent. Little did Zubaida know, the price for one night of love would soon shake the entire village. The morning after Zubaida and Kofi shared that forbidden night, the village of Nioni felt different. The sun still rose, the birds still sang, but there was a heaviness in the air, like the land itself had sensed something had changed. Zubaida walked through the village, her head down, her heart filled with confusion and guilt. The memory of Kofi's arm still lingered in her mind, but so did thoughts of Deo, waiting for her in the city. She tried to clear her head, but the stares of the villagers followed her wherever she went. "She's brought something back with her," whispered one elder. "She's crossed a line," said another. That day, something strange happened. A goat gave birth to a stillborn, the crops near the river began to wither, and the skies darkened earlier than usual. The people murmured, unsure of what was happening. By evening, thunder rumbled across the sky though there was no rain. A child fell ill without reason, burning with fever. His mother cried out, "What is this? What has cursed our land?" The villagers gathered at the hut of Mama Kozaya, the oldest and wisest woman in Nioni. She was known for reading the signs of the spirits, for her wisdom passed down through generations. They demanded answers. Mama Kozaya sat by her fire, her eyes closed, listening to the earth. When she spoke, her voice was strong and calm. "Something sacred has been broken," she said. "A promise was made long ago, and now that promise has been betrayed. The spirits are restless. A curse is upon us." The villagers gasped. "What must we do?" they asked. "The one who broke the vow must come forward," Mama Kozaya said. "Only then can we seek peace with the ancestors." That night, Zubaida could not sleep. The wind outside howled like a voice, calling her name. She felt sick, her body heavy with regret. She knew in her heart what Mama Kozaya had spoken of. It was her. She had broken a promise, not only to Kofi, but also to Deo, and to the spirits of her land. Her one night of passion had not just touched hearts, it had touched the sacred balance of Nioni. Zubaida sat by the river, watching the water flow slowly. Tears ran down her face. "What have I done?" she whispered. Meanwhile, Kofi also felt the weight of their mistake. The village blamed Zubaida, but he knew he was part of it too. He loved her, still did, but now their love had brought pain to their people. He went to Mama Kozaya and confessed. "It was me," he said. "I broke the promise. I let love blind me. Punish me, not her." Mama Kozaya shook her head. "Both of you are bound in this. What is done cannot be undone. The spirits demand truth and repentance." News spread quickly. Some villagers demanded Zubaida leave Nioni. "She's brought a curse. She belongs to the city now." But others defended her. "She came to help her family. She's one of us." The village divided, and tension grew. Families argued, friends turned cold, and the land continued to suffer. Mama Kozaya called for a sacred cleansing ritual, an ancient ceremony meant to heal broken bonds between people and the spirit world. She sent word to Zubaida. "You must come. You must face what has been done." Zubaida stood alone by the river, holding a small pendant Kofi had once given her. She felt fear, but also a strange strength. "I will go," she whispered. "I must face the truth." As she walked to Mama Kozaya's hut for the ritual, Zubaida felt the eyes of the village upon her. Some full of hate, some full of pity. But she no longer cared what they thought. She cared about healing, for the village, for Kofi, and for herself. Whatever came next, she would face it. The sun rose slowly over the village of Nioni, casting a red glow across the sky. It was the day of the cleansing ritual. The air felt heavy, like the village itself was holding its breath. Zubaida stood in front of Mama Kozaya's hut, dressed in a plain white cloth, barefoot, her head bowed. Gone were the city clothes, the fine earrings, the perfume. Today, she came not as the city woman, but as a daughter of Nioni, ready to face her past. Around her, the villagers gathered in silence. Some watched with cold eyes, others with quiet sympathy. Kofi stood at the back, his face unreadable, his heart torn. Mama Kozaya lit the sacred fire in the center of the clearing. Its smoke rose into the sky, carrying prayers to the ancestors. She raised her hands and spoke, her voice strong. Spirits of our land, hear us. A bond was broken, and now we seek your mercy. Let truth rise. Let hearts be cleansed. Zubaida stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. I made a promise to Kofi, to this village, to my ancestors, and I broke it. I lost my way. I let the city change me. I gave my heart to wealth, to comfort, and I hurt those I love. She looked at Kofi, her eyes filled with tears. I gave in to temptation. I came back, and I betrayed the trust you had in me. I am sorry. The villagers listened in silence, their hearts heavy with judgment and curiosity. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The fire crackled loudly, and the smoke turned a strange color, deep blue, swirling like a spirit dancing in the air. Mama Kozaya's eyes widened. The spirits have heard you, she said. But they demand more. You cannot serve two paths, Zubaida. You must choose. Zubaida's heart pounded. What do they mean? She asked. Mama Kozaya stared into the fire. You carry two lives, the one with Kofi, and the one with Deo. The spirits say you cannot keep both. You must let go of one, or both paths will bring ruin. Later that night, Zubaida sat alone in her father's hut, confused and lost. Her mind was full of memories. Deo, kind and generous, offering her a life of riches. Kofi, simple and true, offering her a life of love and peace. Her heart ached. She still had Deo's ring in her bag. They were to be married in just 2 weeks. But after the ritual, she felt something shift inside her. The city no longer felt like home. Its glitter had dimmed. Its promises felt empty. That night, Zubaida dreamed. She stood in a dark forest, surrounded by shadows. From the trees came voices of the ancestors. You have tasted two lives, one voice said. But which one is your truth? Another asked. Suddenly, she saw two paths. One led to a golden city, but was covered in thorns and fire. The other led to a simple home by the river, filled with light and laughter. As she reached for the golden path, a child's cry echoed through the forest. She turned, afraid. Then Kofi appeared, holding a baby, his eyes full of sadness. You left us, he said softly. You chose yourself. Zubaida woke up in tears. In the morning, she made her choice. She returned Deo's ring, sending it with a trusted messenger. In her letter, she wrote, I thank you for all you've done for me. But I cannot walk this path. I am not the woman you think I am. I need to return to my roots, to heal, to live in truth. Deo never replied. Zubaida knew she had closed a door, one that could never reopen. Zubaida went to see Kofi. He sat under the same tree where they once played as children. I ended things with Deo, she said. Kofi looked at her, surprised. Why? Because I realized I lost myself, Zubaida said. I want to find my way back. I want to make things right. Kofi sighed. Zubaida, I will always care for you. But love is not just words. Trust was broken. It takes time to heal. Zubaida nodded. I don't ask for today. I only ask for the chance to prove myself, day by day. In the days that followed, the land began to heal. The river ran clearer, the crops grew green again, and the animals grew strong. The villagers saw the change and believed the curse had lifted. Mama Kozaya smiled. The spirits are pleased. A heart has turned back to truth. Zubaida stayed in Nioni, walking beside her parents, helping others, and slowly rebuilding the trust she had lost. Her path was no longer easy, but it was real. And that was enough. Weeks passed in the quiet village of Nioni. The fields turned green again, the river flowed strong, and the fear of the curse faded. But one thing remained unsettled: Zubaida's place in the village. Though the land had healed, the people had not. Some villagers still saw Zubaida as the cause of their suffering. They whispered as she passed, refused her help, and looked at her with cold eyes. She brought shame, they muttered. She cannot be trusted. She is still a child of the city. But Zubaida did not run. She worked harder than anyone, fetching water, helping the sick, caring for children. She did not speak back or defend herself. Instead, she let her actions speak. She knew that to earn forgiveness, she needed patience and humility. Kofi watched all of this from afar. He admired Zubaida's strength, how she faced judgment without anger. But he also felt confused. He loved her still, but could he trust her again? Every time he saw her, his heart beat faster. But then he remembered the pain, the silence, the fear of losing her forever. Kofi struggled. His friends urged him, "Forgive her. She's changed." But others said, "You deserve better. Move on." In the middle of this storm, Kofi stayed silent. One morning, a stranger arrived in Nioni. He was dressed in fine clothes, with gold rings on his fingers and a proud walk. It was Deo. The village gathered to watch. Why had he come? Zubaida was walking in the fields when she saw him. Her heart dropped. Deo walked straight to her, eyes burning with anger. "You humiliated me," he said. "You broke our engagement and sent back the ring like it was nothing." Zubaida stood tall. "I had to choose what was right. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you." "You owe me," Deo said. "You owe me your life." The villagers gasped. But Zubaida didn't flinch. "I owe you nothing. I owe the truth to myself, to this land, and to the people I love." Before Deo could speak again, Kofi stepped between them. "You need to leave," Kofi said, his voice calm but firm. Deo laughed. "And who are you to stop me?" "I am a son of this land," Kofi said. "And you have no power here." Zubaida made her choice. "You need to respect that." The villagers cheered quietly, nodding in agreement. Deo looked around, so that no one stood with him, and finally walked away, never to return. That evening, the village gathered under the great tree. Mama Kazaya called Zubaida forward. "You faced the spirits. You faced the people. And now, you face your final judgment," she said. The villagers listened. Mama Kazaya looked around and asked, "Do we forgive Zubaida? Do we welcome her again as one of our own?" There was silence. Then an elder woman stood up. "She made mistakes. But she came back. She helped us. She worked without pride. She is still our daughter." One by one, people stood and nodded. Mama Kozaya smiled. "Then let it be known, Zubaida is forgiven. The land is healed, and so are we." Later that night, Zubaida sat by the river, where everything had begun. Kofi found her there, quiet and thoughtful. "You stood up for me today," Zubaida said softly. "You stood up for yourself," Kofi replied. They sat in silence. "I don't know what the future holds," Zubaida said. "But I want to walk it with honesty, no more lies, no more running." Kofi smiled, the first true smile in months. "Let's walk it together, slowly, carefully, but together." They didn't hold hands or promise forever. But in that moment, they understood each other, not perfect, but real. Time moved on in the village of Nioni. The storms had passed. The land was peaceful again, and so were the hearts of its people. Zubaida no longer lived in the shadows of her past mistakes. She was now a part of the village again, not as the girl who had left for the city, but as the woman who had returned, changed, and healed. Each morning, she walked to the fields with the other women, carrying baskets on her head, laughter on her lips, and peace in her heart. She no longer wore fine clothes or gold earrings. Instead, she wore a simple dress, her feet bare on the warm soil, her hands strong from work. With the help of her parents and the support of Mama Kazaya, Zubaida started a small business in the village. She used her skills from the city to make and sell beautiful fabrics and clothes. Soon, her shop became known across nearby villages. People came to Niani to buy her work, and she taught other young girls how to sew, how to dream, and how to build without leaving their roots behind. She told them, "You don't have to run to the city to find success. You can grow where you are planted." Her words inspired many. As for Kofi, he continued to work his farm, but now he smiled more. His heart was lighter. He and Zubaida spent time together, not as lovers rushing back into the past, but as friends walking toward the future. They went slowly, carefully, respecting each other's space, healing together. One day, Kofi brought her a small seedling, a young tree. "Let's plant this together," he said. "Let it grow as we do." Zubaida nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes. Let's grow this from the ground up." They planted the tree near the river, the same river where they had played as children, where they had once said goodbye, and where they had found their way back. Word came months later that Deo had left the city. His wealth had faded, and his pride had turned to bitterness. He was a man who chased power but lost himself in the process. Zubaida heard the news but felt no joy, no hate, only peace. "I don't wish him harm," she said. "He was part of my journey, but he does not define me." Years passed, and the people began to whisper again, but this time with smiles. "Will Kofi and Zubaida marry? Look at them, they are meant to be." But Kofi and Zubaida took their time. They believed in patience, in honesty, in building love slowly. When the day finally came, it was a simple wedding by the river, under the shade of the tree they had planted together. There was no gold, no city lights, just the sun, the land, the people, and true love. Zubaida's journey teaches us that it's never too late to return to your roots. True happiness does not come from riches or power, but from honesty, humility, and love. We all make mistakes, but with courage and wisdom, we can seek redemption. This story reminds us that the most important journeys are the ones that bring us back to ourselves.